In our digital world, there's this constant battle raging. On one side, you've got the architects, meticulously building digital fortresses. And on the other, you have intruders, always searching for that one tiny crack in the wall. Today, we're diving into both sides of this conflict. How you design a rock-solid security blueprint, and then how you stress test it with a professional break-in.
So let's start with a really important question. How do the smartest attackers get into a system and just stay there, completely undetected? Now, forget what you see in the movies. It's almost never about some flashy, obvious piece of malware or smashing down digital doors. No, the most dangerous attacks are the ones you literally never see coming. They're basically invisible.
Let's talk about a type of attack that's kind of like an invisible alarm clock. It's designed to go off again and again and again, all while blending in so perfectly with the system's day-to-day noise that nobody ever even hears it ring.
They do this using a technique called living off the land. What does that mean? Well, instead of bringing in their own suspicious custom-built tools, attackers use the legitimate programs that are already built right into the operating system. Think about this for a second. CrowdStrike found that back in late 2021, a staggering 62% of all their index detections were completely malware-free. The attackers weren't bringing new weapons to the fight. They were just using the tools they found inside the castle walls.
Here's a classic, real-world example. An attacker manages to drop one malicious file into a common folder. Then they use a completely legitimate built-in tool, the Windows Task Scheduler, to create a new task. And this task is simple. It just tells the system to run their malicious program every single minute. And here's the kicker, because it's a trusted Windows tool doing all the work, the activity looks like just another routine system process. It is the perfect camouflage.
So, this all leads to the million-dollar question, right? If the cleverest attackers can hide so well just by using a system's own tools, how on earth do you fight back? How do you find a ghost in the machine before it can cause any real damage?
Well, the answer is you have to get proactive. You have to start thinking like an attacker before they ever strike. And this really comes down to two powerful strategies. First, you build a solid security plan. And then, you do everything in your power to try and break it.
So, that first strategy is called threat modeling. This is the blueprint phase. Before a single line of code is even written, you create this structured, methodical plan. It's a process where you systematically identify every single potential security risk, asking at every turn, okay, if I were the bad guy, how would I break this?
And threat modeling isn't just some boring checklist of security features. It's more like a map. It shows you all the dangerous terrain ahead of time, the weak points, the hidden paths, so you can build your defenses in exactly the right places from day one, instead of frantically trying to patch holes later on.
Okay, to make this real, let's look at a concrete example. One of the most popular methodologies out there is called PASTA. It stands for the Process for Attack Simulation and Threat Analysis, and it's a really thorough 7-stage process for creating that detailed security blueprint we've been talking about.
Now, PASTA is basically a journey through 7 distinct stages. It forces you to connect the dots, all the way from the high-level business goals down to the nitty-gritty technical details. You start with what you're trying to accomplish, you map out the tech, and then you systematically analyze threats every step of the way. It makes sure security is baked in, not just bolted on.
Let's take stage 3, for example, decomposing the application. This is kind of like taking a car engine apart, piece by piece, just to understand exactly how it works. You map out every single function, you trace how data flows through the system, and you identify those absolutely critical trust boundaries, like the firewall that separates your private network from the wild public internet.
And what you get out of all of this is something really powerful, a clear catalog of threats, like the one you see here. By stage 4, you're not just guessing anymore. You're pinpointing specific threats based on your actual design. For a healthcare app, that means planning for an outsider trying to break in, but also, just as importantly, for an insider who might try to abuse their access. The blueprint is really starting to come to life now.
But look, a blueprint is just a plan. How do you know if it'll actually hold up in the real world? This quote really hits the nail on the head. Just running an automated scan isn't enough. It's no substitute for the focused, creative, and sometimes mischievous knowledge of a human expert who's actively trying to find a way in.
And that's where our second pillar of proactive defense comes into play, the professional break-in, which is better known as penetration testing. This is where the blueprint finally meets reality. So a manual penetration test, or pen test for short, is basically a controlled, authorized attack on your own system. You hire ethical hackers, the good guys, to think and act just like real adversaries. Their whole goal is to find and safely exploit vulnerabilities, showing you exactly where your defenses would crumble under a real attack.
Now, this isn't chaos, by the way. It's a super methodical process. It starts with discovery, where the testers just gather intelligence on the target. Then they move into exploitation, where they actively try to breach the system. If they get in, the post-exploitation phase shows just how far they can go. And finally, and this part is absolutely critical, comes reporting, where they give you a detailed roadmap showing not just the problems, but exactly how to fix them.
So, you might be thinking, why is the human element so important here? Can't we just get a computer program to do this? Well, let's compare an automated scanner to, say, a master safecracker.
Sure. Automated scanners are incredibly fast. They can check for tens of thousands of known vulnerabilities in just minutes. But they're kind of like a security guard with a checklist. They can't think outside the box, and they often raise a ton of false alarms. A human tester, on the other hand, is that creative safecracker. They find complex, sneaky flaws a machine would never even think to look for. And the real difference? A human doesn't just find a potential weakness, they prove it can actually be exploited, cutting right through the noise to show you what really matters.
So at the end of the day, this isn't about picking one or the other. You don't choose between the blueprint and the break-in. To be truly secure, you absolutely need both.
It really boils down to this simple idea. Threat modeling is the strategic blueprint you use to design the castle, and penetration testing is the siege you conduct to see if the walls will actually hold.
You need both. The intelligent design and the real-world stress test. A brilliant plan that has never been tested is, well, it's just a theory. And a test without a plan is just chaos. One without the other leaves the doors wide open for an attacker.
So that leaves us with one final question for you to think about. The technology you rely on every single day, was it built with just a blueprint? Or has it actually survived a real break-in?